Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 6, Episode 15 already, Honor Among Thieves. This episode aired February 25th, 1998. Before we talk about this one, anything to say about last week's episode, One Little Ship?
That was a fun episode. I really enjoyed that one. I thought it had a good sense of humor. It was kind of goofy, but at the same time, it had that little bit of seriousness.
Yeah, I would agree it was goofy, the Honey, I Shrunk the Bridge Crew episode. And then this week, because we really like Whiplash on this show, this week we have Donnie Brasco.
Yes.
I'd like to say Donnie Brasco in space, but really, there's not really any space involved in this episode.
Yeah.
Well, should we get started?
I think we should.
In the cold open, we are on a rather gritty-looking alien planet, and we drop into a seedy bar.
Looks very industrial.
Yes. The bar has a neon sign shining over the door, and they show us this sign numerous times in the episode, and I have no idea what it is. It looks like a pile of bones. Maybe it's a sign that says, "Don't come in here or we'll murder you and dump your bones."
Friendly bar.
We see some aliens in the bar playing cards and drinking, and maybe someone doing drugs. I'm not sure.
I think they were.
We see Miles looking a bit rumpled, sitting at the bar, clearly eavesdropping on a conversation taking place behind him. And there are three guys sitting at this table behind him, and one of them is saying Ramus isn't going to be happy about some merchandise that they were supposed to acquire. And then they switch to talking about ordering food, and they send one of the three up to order lunch from the self-serve booth. And this guy has a data port in his neck, like Odo's girlfriend in that Simple Investigation episode.
Oh.
He puts his little connector on the screen, and I assume this is how you hack everything, and it's never meant to be an honest way to operate.
Yeah.
And now in the most obvious way possible, Miles pulls a little device out and presses a button, shining a bright red light.
And the barman doesn't notice this.
It's so funny. And this seems to cause an electrical spark between this alien, whose name is Kroll, and the machine that he's hacking into. And then Miles jumps up and says, "No, don't touch him. He's being spiked." Miles seems to help and stop it, and the alien is okay in the end. Miles takes his fused connector and hands it back to him. Kroll, the alien, is worried about asking Ramus for a replacement device. So we've established here that we're all afraid of Ramus. It's come up already multiple times.
Yeah.
Miles offers to fix the device, and the leader of this group, whose name is Bilby, laughs and asks if Miles knows who he is, and of course Miles says he doesn't. And then Miles gives Bilby a fake name. He says he's Connolly.
Yeah.
And Bilby says he can see that Connolly is down on his luck, and so he says to fix the device, bring it back tomorrow, all polished. And Miles is like, okay.
The alien-looking guy was pretty worried because it's an expensive piece of kit. He's just got fried.
Right.
I'm sure his boss would be happy saying, "Yeah, I burned it up ordering sandwiches."
Right. Stealing sandwiches.
Yes, that's true.
Now Miles meets someone from Starfleet Intelligence in a dark, smoky alley, and we learn that Miles is undercover, infiltrating the Orion Syndicate. This guy here, whose name we don't hear for a long time, I'm just going to call him Mr. Starfleet, says Miles didn't volunteer for this mission, but they had to turn to someone outside of Starfleet Intelligence because all of the operatives keep getting killed. That sounds like a terrible idea for Miles.
Yes.
They want Miles to find out the name of the Syndicate's Starfleet informant, and then Miles can go home. Miles is supposed to get as close to Bilby as possible, but this guy warns that if they figure out what Miles is up to, they'll kill him. So he tells him to be careful.
Yeah.
And we cue the theme song. So far, this sounds like a terrible plan for Miles to be involved in.
This is almost a jump back to it's a Deep Space Nine plan.
A little bit, yeah.
I noticed most of this episode seems to be filmed in soft filter. So is this showing it's a planet with a smog problem or something?
Maybe. It's very dark.
Yeah.
There's also so many flashing lights in this episode. There's like a flashing light inside the bar, and there's a couple of scenes where I think we're supposed to think it's storming and it's just lightning.
Oh, yes, yeah.
It's so, the whole episode, it's like hard on your eyes. The fact that it's so dark really bothers me. Every time they go back to the station, which is only a couple of times in the episode, I'm relieved that I can see. Speaking of that, we go back to the station and everyone is complaining to Major Kira that the station is falling apart without Miles. So he's still not done a good job of cross-training his staff.
Quark gets a dig in at Rom as well, saying they put his idiot brother in charge.
Right.
Do we want to talk about this now or in Management Corner? Because clearly Miles isn't delegating anything or training his staff on how to fix things or keep them working. Kira even says it happens every time Miles leaves the station.
Yeah.
And Dax says no one knows how he keeps all the tech working.
Yeah.
So he can't delegate. He's keeping it all to himself. He's doing that, I want to be a hero rather than training his staff. Not a good look for Miles.
Yeah, I find it really hard to believe that there's no other engineer who could understand it. He can't be that much of a genius. So it just makes you think he's one of those people who wants you to need him.
I do have another idea here. This just popped into my head.
What's that?
Perhaps they're still suffering from, we're going to assign you to Deep Space Nine. Don't want to go. So they're still giving them all the F troop.
It's possible.
So they're giving them all the engineers that Miles has to explain 5 times how you put a fuse in, and they still can't get it.
And he hasn't had great luck working with Bajorans.
They either fall in love with him or they try and murder Vedics.
Right. But Rom should be better at it.
Rom's proven to be kind of awesome at this sort of stuff and hacking stuff together. Look at all the things he did for Quark, so...
He might not know how to prioritize, though. The thing about Miles is he probably knows that you fix the things that Sisko needs first, and then Kira second, and then Odo third, and then everybody else.
I know for a fact we have both had engineers work for us who had no concept of what a priority list is.
Yeah, they would just pick the most interesting problem.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just that. Maybe Rom just doesn't know that he should be doing whatever the Starfleet crew needs first.
Yeah, that's a much better way of thinking of it, because otherwise it would make Miles look bad. And I don't like that.
Yeah. Well, priorities are a big problem. You have to know what's important. Now Julian is whining to Sisko about all of the broken things on the station.
I wish Sisko had said that. So Julian, why did you come in to whine?
Why are you whining? Why have you been such a pain in my butt for the last, 5 episodes?
Couldn't he just come into Sisko and say, what's happening with Miles?
Where's Miles?
I'm really worried about him.
Yeah.
He's my friend.
Yeah, because Sisko does figure out that Julian is here just fishing for info about Miles, but Sisko tells him he can't disclose where Miles is. He says that they both know the chief is perfectly capable of taking care of himself.
Yeah.
Then we go back to the CD bar. Eventually, we learn that this planet is Farius Prime, by the way. And Miles comes into the bar and he's fixed the broken device. And Bilby is impressed. And he's been looking into Miles's background, Connolly's background. And he takes Miles for a walk to what I guess is Bilby's apartment.
Yep.
Where we meet Chester, Bilby's adorable cat.
It's the best thing in the episode.
It is the best thing in the episode. This cat is so cute. And also, I was worried that he wasn't getting enough exercise in this tiny little cramped apartment. So hopefully he gets to go outside or he's got someplace he can run.
Yeah.
Bilby grabs a Klingon disruptor, which makes Miles a little nervous, but it seems that they recently bought 3 of these and they don't work. Miles immediately diagnoses the problem. The induction coil is burned out. Miles tries to dig a little, asking what his boss wants with these weapons, but Bilby says he didn't ask, so he doesn't know.
Yeah.
And then Bilby offers him some cake that his wife made. Miles takes a bite, and he clearly doesn't like it, but he pretends that it's good. And Bilby shows Miles a picture of his family who are in New Sydney. He tells Miles he should get a family because it's the most important thing. He says that 5 times in this episode.
Yeah. Is he a Cardassian?
Maybe. Bilby tells him that he pays his monthly fare to Ramus and then he sends all the rest of his money back home to his family. Well, Bilby inexplicably spends a lot of time explaining that Ramus is above him and he's above the other 2 in the bar. We haven't already figured that out.
Yeah.
And he says he needs to know if he can trust Miles. He does offer Miles more cake, and eventually Miles admits that the cake is a bit dry, which makes Bilby laugh, and he appreciates the honesty because he says his other 2 pretend like the cake is amazing.
Yeah.
That was funny.
This was a weird scene. It was very quick. We had to get a lot of exposition in.
Yeah.
And I assume the cake is just to show that Miles will tell Bilby the truth, unlike the other people around Bilby.
Right. We go back to the dark alley, and the Starfleet guy is giving Miles the induction coils he needs to fix the disruptors. He says it's courtesy of the Klingon ambassador to Farius.
Yeah. Miles says, there's a Klingon ambassador here? Gowron mustn't like him very much.
Yeah, right. Miles asks if he can talk to his wife, but Mr. Starfleet says no, it's too dangerous.
Now, this seems to be a very dark smoky planet with, lots of lightning, and it seems kind of, I don't know if it's just people smoking or whether the atmosphere is just full of smog. Isn't Miles putting a human take on things here about it not being a terribly nice place? For a Klingon, seeing as what we know what the Klingon homeworld's like and what their ships are like, this might be a prime posting.
Yeah, dark, smoky.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do like that.
The Klingon ambassadors are going, please can I have Ferris? Please can I have Ferris?
Maybe.
Farius. I keep on calling it Ferris. You can blame Andor for that.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. Or Ferris Bueller.
Just so we won't get letters.
We go back to the seedy bar, and Miles brings in the fixed disruptors. Bilby tells Kroll to contact Ramus and tell him that they've got the disruptors now. And then they ask Miles how he got a hold of the replacement parts, but Miles doesn't answer. When Bilby gets really aggravated and threatening, Miles finally says that he stole them. He thought it was better if Bilby didn't know, just in case the police started nosing around. Bilby is impressed that Miles was willing to protect him.
And then takes him to buy a suit.
And in the very next shot, we see Miles dressed in this very green outfit that at least it fits better than the burlap bag he was wearing a minute ago.
So they've dressed the Irish actor as a leprechaun. The only thing missing was the little green derby hat.
Yeah, even his boots are green. It's quite funny, actually.
Was this a joke on Cole Meany by one of the writers?
I mean, maybe. Now we meet the alien that Bilby bought the broken disruptors from, and the alien's got like a purple line down the center of his face.
Yeah.
He says the disruptors were working just fine when he provided them, and he suggests maybe Bilby dropped them and broke them. He's not willing to return Bilby's money, so Bilby just shoots him in the leg. And then even though Miles protests, he eventually just shoots and kills the guy.
Okay, so I don't think it's terribly hidden that Bilby is part of the Orion Syndicate.
No.
You must be suicidal if you sell them faulty merchandise.
Yeah, and then pretend like they broke them.
Yeah. I thought it seemed like a really kind of odd thing, but I guess they had to show Bilby was just murderous.
Yeah.
It didn't seem to fit with, if Bilby's this seriously connected guy who's a member of this crime organization, you wouldn't mess with him.
Well, I was wondering if maybe he's not that connected, and he's certainly not very high up.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody else, like this weapons dealer guy, figures he could take his job or something.
Oh, so there's some rivalry going on. So if I make him look like a fool, then I could take his place.
I mean, maybe, right? That's some headcanon there. I'm writing more than what the writers wrote.
Yep.
But you're right. They were just trying to show that Bilby is ruthless, because this is the only chance we get to see it. Back in Bilby's apartment, he says no one takes him for a fool. He'll do whatever it takes to protect what he has. We also get another shot of the delightful cat hair loafing on the bed. Bilby says, this life isn't for everyone. This is when there were all these annoying flashing lights that were happening because it was supposed to be lightning. Bilby does tell Miles that he'd like to be out of the syndicate, but he's had opportunities that he wouldn't have had anywhere else. He says the syndicate is huge. They have people everywhere. They even have a guy in Starfleet. Miles probes a bit about the Starfleet guy, but somehow Bilby doesn't figure out that Miles is a little bit too interested in this topic.
Yeah.
Bilby does admit that their Starfleet contact has provided the names of all the Starfleet undercover operatives, which I guess is why they needed Miles. And Bilby also lets it slip that the Starfleet contact was on Ryza last year, and he was in charge of the weather control system, where Ramus bribed him to make it stop raining.
Yeah, Bilby gave him all the details that Miles needs to identify who the guy is.
Yep.
I really like Miles's approach here. He starts asking these questions. He says, are you sure this guy isn't a double agent?
Right.
Giving a justification of why he's asking questions, making it seem like Miles is nervous about, what are you doing? This guy's Starfleet. They're incorruptible. So I thought that was actually a good plot point or good way of spinning it.
Yeah.
And I liked how Miles could think on his feet. It worked.
Agreed. Well, then Bilby gets a call that Ramus wants to see him. So we head back to the bar. There's only like 3 sets in this entire episode. We're either in the dark alley, in the bar, or in the apartment.
Yeah. With all that lightning and the storm that's obviously going on, aren't you picturing the Klingon ambassador like sitting out on the balcony with a
enjoying himself,
umbrella and a deck chair up?
It's lovely here. Well, in the bar, Ramus and his thugs beam in. Ramus is a younger, smoother dude than Bilby.
Yeah.
and he's brought someone for Bilby to meet, and out steps the Vorta from the previous episode.
Yes.
Ramus now notices Miles and asks, who the hell is this guy? And Bilby stands up for Miles, which is good enough for Ramus, apparently, and the Vorta finds the lack of security precautions amusing.
Yes.
And he laughs.
He does not seem impressed with their security vetting process.
No, he's like, okay.
So, as Bilby's witnessed for him,
right.
I guess that he's, using Donnie Brasco terms, a friend of ours, aka connected guy, not a member of the family, but connected.
Right.
So he would enjoy some privileges within the organization.
Yeah, I think that's the implication. Well, the Vorta here wanted to meet Bilby for some reason, and he says he's got an important task for him. And he says, we'll contact you when it's time. And then Ramus says to Bilby, don't let me down.
Yeah.
And he sends his love to Bilby's family, which is quite threatening. And then they beam out.
Not threatening at all, just, how's your family?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I have some people looking in on them, yeah.
When they're gone, Bilby asks Miles if he knows what just happened. He says he witnessed for Miles, which means he's now responsible for anything Miles does.
Yeah.
But Bilby is clearly very nervous in this scene and afraid of Ramus.
Right.
Back to the dark alley, set number 3, where Mr. Starfleet compliments Miles on his new green suit, and Miles tells him about the Starfleet guy on Risa. They figure it should be easy to identify who that was.
Yeah.
Now, this is all that Miles was supposed to do, but then he reveals the Vorta's involvement.
Yeah.
And Mr. Starfleet says now Miles can't leave until he figures out what's going on with the Dominion and the Orion Syndicate.
Yeah, Mr. Starfleet Security is really surprised by this. He's quite shocked, which I think is interesting because it shows how inefficient Starfleet Security is, that they're not even aware the Orion Syndicate is working with the Vorta.
Right.
Or the Dominion, rather.
Yep. We go back to the bar, and Miles is helping Kroll rob a bank. Somehow on this thing where they could order lunch, they're able to rob a bank. And the music is dramatic, but it's really kind of silly, and they all laugh at this big robbery they just pulled off.
It's a very versatile console. You can do anything with it.
I mean, I guess we're just trying to show here that Miles is just fitting in with their shenanigans, and they don't want them to be too murderous or violent.
Yeah, he's just one of the guys.
Yeah. We go back to set number 2 now, Bilby's apartment, and we have the obligatory scene of the mobster offering a prostitute to Miles.
Lady of a negotiable affection.
Why do I feel like Miles has been offered a woman before? Wasn't there another episode where we talked about this? What was that episode? The one where the cloud monster was attacking the town?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right in that episode because he's going to be the protector of the town.
Yes, he's supposed to stay forever.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, the only woman character in the episode, so great. That's amazing.
That's very Hollywood. This is in the 90s. You've got 3 characters you can use. Mm-hmm. This is hitting one of them.
But this is also such a waste of time. This is a short episode. They could have used this time, these precious minutes, to better establish the relationship with Bilby or to work on making these characters more menacing because they're really just kind of goofy. They're not even that menacing. And then just for fun, they had to kind of throw in some homophobia into this scene as well.
Don't tell me you don't like girls. He could have asked.
Oh, yeah. I'm so dumb.
Hey.
It was very uncool, this short scene. Well, Bilby again tells Miles that he needs to settle down and get a family for himself. He also says he can really read people, and he could read Miles right away. And he says he's about to take a step up in the organization, and Miles has really changed his luck. So he says he's going to take care of Miles, Connolly, of course, because they're family now. That's a little bit ominous.
Yeah, it's that thing of, oh yeah, I can tell what people are like just by looking at them.
Yeah, which, is also, I guess, diminishing to people by just saying, I've made all my decisions about you when I saw you.
Yeah.
Just shows more small-mindedness. Maybe this is another example of how we see that Bilby's not much of a big shot and he's not that smart.
Yeah.
He's like making decisions about Miles after his first meeting with him. So he's not really thinking anything through.
Yeah. He's not a big picture player.
Definitely not. We go back to set number 3 in the alley. And Miles is late for his meeting. He was at the races with Bilby, and he says that Bilby witnessed for him, which really impresses Mr. Starfleet. Miles asks what will happen to Bilby, and Mr. Starfleet says if he's lucky, we'll get to him before they do, and he'll be safe in a Federation prison. They just need a good case against him. When Miles leaves, Mr. Starfleet looks concerned that maybe Miles cares a little bit too much about Bilby.
Yes.
Back to set number 1 in the seedy bar, and Ramus has dropped by unexpectedly.
Yeah, all the mobsters are in a really good mood when they come in.
It seems Bilby has a traitor in his midst, and the Vorta wants to guess which one it is.
Yes.
And the Vorta, very frighteningly, guesses it's Miles, but it turns out to be this guy named Flith, who is the guy with the seedy mustache.
Yep.
It seems he was doing some business on the side and not paying the boss.
Yeah, and the barman just comes up behind and shoots him.
Yeah, and then he also has to drag him out.
Yeah.
That barman has a tough job.
I hope he's getting tipped sufficiently for the work he's doing. I think this is the second iteration in this episode of, I can know things just by looking at someone. The Vorta says, he can tell a traitor just by looking in his eyes.
Yeah, really.
And says, it's Miles.
Yes, except he could. Well, Ramus is here because he has a job for Bilby. He wants him to assassinate the Klingon ambassador on the planet using the Klingon disruptors. Miles surmises it will look like he was killed by a rival Klingon house. The Vorta says this ambassador has been advocating breaking away from the Federation and focusing on defending the Empire against the Dominion. This will make it look like Gowron ordered the assassination, and the ambassador will become a martyr, and his cause will gain strength. He says the Klingons will retreat into their territory, leaving only the Federation for the Dominion to fight.
Now, is this Vorta arrogance that they have to tell everyone how clever their plan is?
I don't buy here that the Vorta would reveal this much information, especially with what he's about to say.
But at the same time, the Vorta believe their own hype. So maybe the Vorta want to make sure everybody realizes that they are the cleverest people here and they have plans within plans within plans.
Well, but again, maybe doing some headcanon writing here.
Yeah.
I wonder, when Miles speaks up, Bilby tries to make him stop talking, but the Vorta was like, and then he engages in the conversation with Miles. And I imagine it's possible that if they're looking at Bilby as just sort of a thug, and he, again, doesn't have the brain power, they might see Miles as someone who is smarter.
Ooh.
And could be more useful.
This guy could be useful within the organization.
Yeah, rather than dangerous, which is, I suppose, what they should see.
Yeah.
Maybe they would think, hey, maybe this guy could be something.
Bilby could be working for him, yeah.
Right, exactly. Well, the Vorta says it's critical the Dominion's involvement remains secret, so if something goes wrong and they're captured, they're to keep the Vorta out of it. Bilby agrees, and then the Vorta says the Dominion and the Orion Syndicate have a lot in common. In both organizations, loyalty is everything.
Interesting. The difference is the Vorta and the Jem'Hadar's loyalty is programmed in.
Right, yeah, they don't have a choice.
I guess maybe that's the point. These people who've joined the Orion Syndicate, once you're in, you don't have a choice. You do as you're told. Or your family takes it, or you're killed.
Yeah, it's similar.
I think you'd rather have loyalty than fear, though. The Vorta and the Jem'Hadar, their loyalty is based on they see the founders as gods. So it really is sort of reverence and loyalty. Whereas the Orion Syndicate, it seems to be based more on fear.
It's just fear. Yeah. Well, profit, I guess, and fear.
Right.
Miles tells this plan to Mr. Starfleet, who says he'll let the Klingons know so that they'll be ready. And Miles is immediately upset that he's setting up Bilby to be murdered.
Yep.
Mr. Starfleet says, I think you have it backwards. I'm just going to warn our allies of an assassination attempt. And he says, if the Klingons go after the Syndicate, I won't shed any tears. And Miles sarcastically says, I'm sure you won't. Mr. Starfleet notices that Miles seems to have lost perspective, and he's now sympathizing with the bad guys, so he's decided to pull Miles out.
Which Miles totally has.
Absolutely, and he's very clear about it. And Miles is just furious now, and he says, you told me Bilby would go to prison, and he grabs Mr. Starfleet and punches him in the face, knocking him out.
Yeah.
Ay, Miles. Well, now Miles goes to Bilby and tries to talk him out of going into this assassination attempt.
Most importantly, Bilby is feeding the cat.
Dry food, which is not good. You should feed your cat wet food.
Yeah.
Miles says it's a trap. But when Bilby won't listen, Miles tells him that he's working for Starfleet Intelligence. Bilby is really shaken by this. He doesn't want to hear it. It doesn't matter at this point if the Klingons or the Syndicate kills him, but somebody will. And even if he turns himself in, he's like, they're going to go after my family. So he decides to just go through with the plan. He thinks Ramus might leave his family alone if he's killed.
Hey.
Which is terrible. Miles tells him that he wasn't even after Bilby. He just needed to know who the Starfleet contact was. This really disappoints Bilby because he wasn't even important enough to be the target.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's a total bummer. So I'm not even worth investigating. They're looking for someone else.
Yeah, just using me.
Yeah.
Bilby says the smart thing would be to kill Miles, but he's not that smart. And then he tells Miles to make sure Chester, the cat, is looked after.
Bilby is clearly a good cat owner.
And then he looks at his family's picture. He asks Miles if he has a family. And when Miles says yes, Bilby says good. It's the most important thing. And then he leaves. Finally, we're back on the station where you can see what's happening and there aren't any flashing lights. Oh my God, there were so many flashing lights in the last 10 minutes of this episode.
You really did not like that, no.
I can't look at it. It gives me a headache. Miles tells Julian that he'll never forget that look on Bilby's face. Miles is just devastated that Bilby trusted him and got him killed.
Yeah.
Julian is trying to get him to see that it isn't his fault. He says, you were just doing your duty. Julian leaves and we see sweet Chester the cat jump into Miles's lap. The end.
Oh, that was adorable.
That was a very cute cat.
And the best thing, Miles managed to get a cat out of the whole deal. That was pretty good.
Yeah, he should look at that as a bonus. And it seems to be quite a calm cat.
Yeah.
He was probably drugged in the 90s, but he seemed like quite a sweet cat.
You know, my last watching of this, I watched it with a cat sitting on my feet. She could have sat anywhere, but she decided, I'm going to sit on your feet.
She knew it was a cat episode.
Yes.
All right, let's talk over analysis.
Well, I think my first point, which maybe also involves some headcanon, Bilby had a great way of getting out of this whole thing. He might get in trouble, but he could get out of it. He kills Miles and then tells Ramus Miles goofed up the whole breaking into the power grid, screwed it up, basically would have got them caught and the mission would have failed. Ramus might not like it, but he may accept it. And also the fact that Bilby took care of it.
Yeah, it wasn't that Miles was a traitor, but that he was maybe incompetent.
Right.
Yeah. Now, that's good.
He could probably say, look, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll find another hacker. We'll do it another time. And still be able to accomplish the mission. And Bilby would be in the clear.
Yeah, I just think they've really tried to establish with us that Bilby is not that smart. He doesn't really seem to think on his feet that quickly. Maybe he also doesn't have that ruthless streak that he needs to have to go higher in the organization.
Yeah, that makes it actually worse because it shows the weakness in this episode of they didn't manage to build that character of Bilby up. So you could see that.
Yeah.
They just made it look like Bilby was just effectively a soldier.
Yeah. I don't think they did a great job of establishing really this whole story. They tried to do too much in 46 minutes. Or they tried maybe to rely on what people already knew about this type of story.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Next thing, I think Starfleet needs to work on witness protection.
Yeah, they didn't even change the way he looks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that if you look at someone like Bilby who's motivated by the safety of his family, offering him a deal, maybe he'd jump at that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because when you said that, I was thinking about they should have altered the way Miles looked, because once Miles leaves here, the Vorta has seen him, Ramus has seen him.
Yeah.
If they had made him look like an alien, he would have been safer. But you're right. They could have pulled Bilby and his entire family, and the universe is big. I'm sure they could have put him somewhere.
Right.
Good point.
Next thing, I did like Starfleet Intelligence. I'm just following procedure, just warning an ally. And then after he says that, it's not my concern what happens next.
No.
It so reminds me of the way the Maquis were murdered and destroyed, while Starfleet stood by saying, oh dear, if there's only something we could do. Yeah. It's that sort of the guilt of inaction. They're hiding behind process, using procedure to avoid actually having to make a decision or take responsibility. And I felt that was an interesting take on Starfleet Intelligence. They were just saying they were following procedure rather than, oh yeah, we're warning the Klingons so they can kill them for us.
At the same time, I guess I see the point. If intelligence, we don't know what they've all seen about the Orion Syndicate. And what we do know is that they've been killing their operatives.
Yes.
So you can imagine that Mr. Starfleet here, I think his name was Chadwick. They said it near the end of the episode.
Julian did, yeah.
But you can imagine that he doesn't have too many sympathetic feelings about anybody in that organization if it's killing a bunch of his operatives.
Right.
So I can't say, I guess, looking at it that way, that I blame him for that attitude. Oh, we're going to send some mobsters in to the Klingons and let the Klingons take care of it? Yeah, okay.
Maybe I see it as a little different of it's the Federation washing their hands of wanting to deal with a problem and not get their hands dirty.
Oh, yeah, I get it.
I feel there's an implication that the Klingons are allowing the Orion Syndicate to operate. They're not hurting the Empire. We don't really have an issue with them. And doing this suddenly makes Gowron take notice and go, wait a minute, they're trying to kill people to implicate me and interfere with the Empire.
Yeah.
Right. Now we're going to send people out. And the Klingons aren't going to do a thorough investigation and look at people's connections. They're going to go, yeah, who's the guy associated with the Orion Syndicate? We kill them. Well, you might have a few collateral casualties there, like the Klingons would care.
Yeah.
I would see the Klingons saying, yeah, there were known operatives of the Orion Syndicate at that bar. We blew up the whole bar.
Yeah, this is maybe more like what Section 31 might do.
Exactly.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And I think they're pushing the responsibility off onto the Klingons so they can keep their hands clean and say, hey, we're the evolved humans. We don't do that kind of thing. We get somebody else to do it for us.
Right.
I find it sort of morally questionable.
It's morally cloudy.
But interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Next point. Miles didn't exactly volunteer for this.
Obviously.
So Cisco ordered him, a family guy, to go on a dangerous undercover mission where he could probably get killed when he's an engineer.
Yeah, I wondered how Miles got voluntold into this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And why Miles? Did he receive proper training? Has he been trained for this? Did he have a background of something in his past that would help him work into this environment?
My guess is he was closest.
Did Keiko get any say on this mission?
I'm sure no.
So many questions with that.
Yeah, I agree. I had the same questions in my overanalysis.
And possibly my final thing.
Yeah.
Miles is a Starfleet officer.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a background of fighting against the enemies of the Federation for when it was needed. He needed to do it.
Yeah.
These people are murderous criminals. No moral compass. They'll kill people who are in their way and their families. He knows that from Bilby, saying what would happen if Ramus found out. They're working with an enemy who want to destroy the Klingon Empire and the Federation, subjugate all its people, kill Miles's friends, all these awful things. And he cares about Bilby, who's working with them.
Yeah.
I would see this more likely as Miles goes to see Bilby, stuns him, and hands him over to the Klingons for their special interrogation techniques so they can find everything out they can.
Yeah.
How could you look at someone who threatens your family, everything that you hold dear, and say, oh, well, he's not really a bad guy.
Yeah, he's nice. He bought me a new suit and got me a haircut.
He made me look like a leprechaun. It was so adorable.
He got me a prostitute.
Yeah.
No, I don't think Miles is this dumb. That was one of my overanalysis points, too, because not only should we at this point be quite aware of what the Orion Syndicate is capable of,
Yep.
Bilby killed someone right in front of Miles.
Yeah.
So even though there were times where I was like, gosh, they really haven't made Bilby seem like a really terrible person, but he did do that.
Yeah.
You could almost see it maybe if Miles had been there for months or years, but you get the impression this is a week. So I agree. It doesn't make a ton of sense. Miles, who hates the Cardassians.
And still remembers what they did.
Yeah. He has a long memory, so it's almost like they picked the wrong character to use for this.
I think from a plot standpoint, it would make more sense if the Vorta wasn't there. And if it was an Orion operative saying, look, this will help our business if you do this.
Right.
If we split the Federation and the Klingons, we'll be able to make more money.
Yeah.
Because now it becomes an existential threat to the Federation that they're actually working with your enemy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think my final point is, if you find this criminal organization that you obviously know some of the members and some of the people involved are working with the Dominion, why isn't the Federation now sending out purification squads to remove anyone even suspected of being a member? They're undermining your war effort at a very basic level.
Yeah.
And even if you didn't say, why not take anyone suspected and put them in protective custody? Start rounding up the organization. Even suspected members of the organization. I think you could very quickly start disabling its ability to work, especially when it's effectively now become a terrorist organization. because it's working with your enemy.
I think we're supposed to believe it's not that easy.
Yeah.
And that they have actually been trying to infiltrate and find out who all the people are, but they've been unable to.
Yeah. And you think this was just one guy that they actually knew about?
I think there were many that they knew about, but their operatives were all getting killed.
Yeah.
So I think we're just supposed to believe it's hard.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. They can't just ignore it, especially now.
Right.
But also, that's not the Star Trek show I want to watch. But it wouldn't be a bad thing for us to just hear about it, even if we don't have to see an episode about it.
So you're saying this would be Section 31's starting point?
Maybe.
I'd watch that show.
You know, Section 31 comes up in Discovery, and I think that's the first place I ever saw them. I believe I heard they start on Deep Space Nine, but we haven't heard that yet.
Yes.
Maybe that's how it will start.
Well, yes.
I guess you can't say. Never mind. No spoilers. I assume it's still coming.
Something will happen.
Okay, all right.
And that, I think, does finally wrap up my overanalysis. Unless you want to say maybe Miles actually did all this deliberately because he wanted the cat.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, we covered all the things I had in my overanalysis except for I didn't buy that the Vorta would beam down to this bar, tell them the entire plan, especially with a new guy standing right there, that the guy that he thought was a traitor.
Yes.
And then he says the Dominion's involvement must remain a secret. It doesn't make any sense. If the Dominion's involvement must remain a secret, why did you even come down here? Because we know you're the Dominion just by looking at you.
Maybe he didn't trust Ramus to actually deliver the plan correctly. Maybe as well, it's the Vorta tell the Jem'Hadar what to do. So if you're like, it's programmed into the Vorta that everybody below me is an idiot. I have to tell them precisely what to do.
Yes, but they're only allowed really to talk to the first, remember?
Okay, that's a good point.
So this just seems different, but I guess they could be looking at them as inferior to the Jem'Hadar.
I would agree. Why are you spilling the plans to these basically foot soldiers and then saying, if you get caught, don't spill the beans?
Well, I think the most surprising thing is that he would make himself visible.
Yeah.
Just because if it's imperative that the Dominion involvement is hidden, don't walk into a bar with the other guys in the syndicate. It doesn't make any sense.
Nobody saw me, right? Nobody saw me.
Yeah.
Not here.
Yes.
I would wonder, though, would these low-level foot soldiers, would they actually know what a Vorta is? Would they have seen a Vorta or have any understanding of what they are? Or would they just go, some guy with ears came in?
Well, okay, maybe just seeing him. Yeah, but they go into a bar. There could be somebody else in there who does know.
Yeah.
It's not like it's a private meeting, although maybe this bar, you're only allowed in there if you are a criminal.
Then why did Miles get in?
But Miles was in there, yeah. Well, even if they don't know that a Vorta is in the Dominion, he says the Dominion.
Oh.
In his little speech.
Okay, yeah, that's a bit of a giveaway, isn't it?
Yeah, so he didn't do a great job of keeping it secret.
Maybe this is why you don't put Vorta in undercover roles.
Maybe. They're not good at being undercover. They're more showmen.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, they like the play more than they like the actual thing that gets done.
Right.
All right, well, we already talked about my other overanalysis, so I will go to women in the future. Do I need to mention the only woman in this episode?
You can if you wish.
I feel like I don't need to. I mean, obviously we see Kira and Dax on the station, but that doesn't count. They're the normal characters. But as part of this storyline, we have one female character. That's it. And she's a prostitute. By the way, I don't even think she has any lines, which is quite sad. Anyway, moving on. Let's go to rating.
Indeed.
Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Well, to give you some background, this episode came out 12 months after Donnie Brasco, and I had the weirdest flashback watching this episode, because I've probably only seen it a couple of times, ever. And I remember watching this and going, oh, Donnie Brasco.
Yeah.
Which we'd seen about a year before.
Yeah.
This episode could have been great if it had been a two-parter, because one of the things that made Donnie Brasco work is they show this building relationship between the undercover agent and the mobster, and how he gets sucked into his family and his world. And he realizes that this is just kind of a normal guy doing a very bad job. And this is what's missing for this episode. Because it's so short, because it's so compact, you don't understand why Miles even likes this guy.
Right.
And I feel it was one of the writers watched Donnie Brasco and went, hey, let's go and do a Donnie Brasco episode. And then tried to compress all of that into this show. And, it failed. At the end, I'm like, Miles should just shoot Bilby himself. He's a complete scumbag. How could you like this guy? Seeing Miles get sucked into that world didn't make sense either. It's a great concept episode that couldn't be executed in the time that they had.
Yeah.
And it needed to be a two-parter, and I think they needed to build that relationship more. And maybe even to make it more interesting, have Starfleet Intelligence wanting to do questionable things that challenges Miles' loyalties and makes Miles even look at them and go, wait a minute, you're acting like the guys we're supposed to be against. So I feel on so many levels, this episode came very close to being good. I'm giving it a neutral because it's not terrible, but it manages to miss what it was aiming at. And I don't think they really gave... Colm Meaney did a great job on his side with questionable material. So I have to go very thumbs neutral on this one. 2 thumbs neutral.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. We had talked a few weeks ago about Miles's character not really being utilized much yet this season.
Yeah.
And then they pull this episode out, and it wasn't really a stretch for the character. It's not like he had a lot of emotional stuff to do.
Yeah.
It didn't seem like a really complicated acting task for Colm Meaney, but he certainly did perfectly fine in it. I agree that the episode wasn't long enough for what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
They were sort of playing on the audience's previous knowledge of what a mobster story should be, rather than establishing the story.
Yes.
They didn't establish even really the danger of Bilby or his cohorts at all.
Right.
They almost seemed like hapless morons a few times, like when they were having the whole thing about ordering lunch. I think we were supposed to be scared of them, or Miles was supposed to be scared of them, but it really wasn't scary. Ramus was scary.
Yes.
Because I guess they established with us that he was scary, and then also he had a good presence. But none of the fear in this episode was earned. None of what Miles did was really earned.
Yes.
It just didn't make a ton of sense. It's a shallow episode.
Yeah.
And I did read that the guy who played Bilby, it was supposed to be a different actor, an older actor, and they were going to play on Bilby being more of a father figure to Miles. But they didn't do that in the story either. So I know they kept trying to get the guy to say, look how important family is, but even that, it's just like he had that one picture of his family that looked so staged and fake. The whole thing was just, it was just off. And then on top of it, I think I've said this before, I don't understand the Orion Syndicate. I don't understand what they do. We've had a couple of mentions of them, but this is really the first time we've interacted with them.
They're the space mob.
Yes, apparently they're the space mob. But this also isn't a Star Trek story. There's no Trek in this story.
Yeah.
So I don't care. I find it all meh. I'm right with you at neutral.
Yeah, that's where I feel the writing of this one is, I want to make Donnie Brasco in Star Trek, and failed.
Yeah, this is disappointing.
I think had there been an older actor, it might have actually worked a little better.
Maybe.
You need the time with a story like this.
Yeah. I remember when I was in 8th grade, and we had an assignment in my English class to write a story. And I wrote a mobster story. This feels like that.
Nice.
I mean, I had all the tropes in there. I knew specific things that I had obviously seen on TV. I doubt I'd seen any movies that were mobster movies at that age. But I felt like I knew what would be in a mobster story at the age of like 12 or 13. And I'm sure it was terrible. It just seemed like that's what this was. It was playing too much on something else and not on the source material.
Yeah, that's a good take.
Yeah.
Anytime you're relying on the audience to actually fill in the story and know the blanks, it's going to be
great.
a miss.
It works for jokes, I think, but it's hard for it to work for drama.
Yeah. This season is such whiplash.
It's very whiplashy. Yeah.
We have a great episode, then we have a meh episode, then we have a funny episode that really works as a classic Trek story, and then we have this. I wonder if at this point they were suffering from the problem of they needed storylines.
They needed some filler, and this is probably a good example of a filler episode.
Yeah. Didn't hate it, didn't love it.
Agreed. And actually, I think I liked it a little more the first time. The second time through, I was just like, oi, it was a grind to get through it and get the notes down.
I am serious when I say I had like a flashback to watching this originally. It was really weird because I remember my reaction to it. And it's funny when that can happen.
All right. That wraps up Season 6, Episode 15. Come back next week for Episode 16. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at rebingeit@gmail.com or tweet us at ReBingeIT. We're also on Instagram and YouTube at ReBingeIT. You can check us out on talkthroughmedia.com, where you can leave feedback for individual episodes, and you can also listen to the other podcasts in our network. ReBingeIt is also part of a Patreon, patreon.com/Star Trek TTM, and that covers all of the podcasts on the Talk Through Media network.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.